right, so at this time I'll call the regular school board meeting into session. And board members, we do have a change to the agenda, and so I'll just read that out. It is consent agenda. Correction to item 8.26 should be request to advertise a public hearing for the adoption of a new job description for specialist safe schools. And so at this time, I'm looking for a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Walker, second by Mr. Bryant. All in favor? Vote is 5-0. And so at this time, Superintendent, we have a couple of recognitions. And first of all, the recognition of Michelle Cook, Bruner Middle School recipient of FBLA Advisor Hall of Fame Award.
I would like her principal, Dr. Hudson, is here. And Michelle's going to forward, please. Been knowing this young lady a while. She's been working hard for us for quite some time. For those of you who don't know what FBLA is, it is Future Business Leaders of America. These are young men and women who think they might want to enter the business world. And in middle school, Ms. Cook works with those children to let them kind of get a little taste of what that might be like. Well, she's obviously done an incredible job because, may I read this? It says, Superintendent Mary Beth Jackson and the Okaloosa County School Board extend our warmest congratulations and highest esteem to Michelle Robinson Cook, Bruner Middle School, on the occasion of her outstanding accomplishment in receiving the Florida Chapter Future Business Leaders of America Advisor Hall of Fame. That's pretty wonderful. So, yeah, you gotta hold this little thing like that. Where did Doctor? There he goes. Get it? Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Hudson.
All right, congratulations. Now to item 3.2, recognition of Gabrielle Lerner Sparrow, Okaloosa STEM Academy State winner in the Junior Chemistry Division of the 2018 State Science and Engineering Fair of Florida, presented by Superintendent Jackson.
Thank you, and I would like to ask her principal or his principal to come forward. This is pretty cool. I mean, yeah, it's very cool. Oh, hi.
Hello.
I want to read this because, you know, chemistry was not one of those things, Gabriel, that I excelled in school. It was one of those things that I did, but not nearly as well as obviously you're able to understand. But this says, Superintendent Mary Beth Jackson and members of the school board of Okaloosa County extend our warmest congratulations and highest esteem to Gabriel Lerner Sparrow on the occasion of his outstanding accomplishment. State winner, 2018 63rd State Science and Engineering Fair of Florida, East Panhandle Region in Chemistry. And where is your... There's Melissa.
I'm really proud of you.
That's a pretty cool thing to, and you're his teacher?
Yes.
Do you challenge these children to do all they can do?
I try.
I wanted to congratulate Gabriel and thank Miss Wilson. She and Miss Calhoun traveled with 24 middle and high school students, and Gabriel's peers, all 14 of our middle school students who traveled to State Science Fair, received a placement or a special award. So all 14 of our middle school students going to State Science Fair walked across the stage, and 6 out of 10 of our high school students at State Science Fair also received a placement or a special award. And I can't say enough to Ms. Wilson and Ms. Calhoun and all the efforts of our students and their teachers and their parents who helped them along the way in preparing for State Science Fair. And congratulations, you were the only one from our area who earned first place. So that's a huge accomplishment. Great job.
Thank you so much, Gabriel. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, and congratulations again. All right, board members, so now moving on to Section 4, visitors. And Ms. Evans, I'll request that if there are any questions and so forth, that you record those for us. And at this juncture, we'll move to 4.1, but let me remind the board members, to help you remind me, that at 6:15, we're to have a public hearing. In any case, 4.1, Mrs. Emily Lamberson, proposed relocation of pre-K D classes. Welcome.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Dr. Emily Lamberson. I'm here tonight on behalf of my children, Joel, who is a first grader at PLU, and Isaac, who's in pre-K D at Blue Water, though he was scheduled to move to PLU in August. On April 5th, the pre-K D parents received a letter stating that all Central Zone pre-K D classes would relocate to the STEM Academy for the 2018-2019 school year. This letter was concerning for several reasons. First, it demonstrated that the Okaloosa County School District saw no need to involve parents in discussing the removal of their children from their neighborhood schools to a middle school in the next town. Now, we know parental involvement is important in a child's success at school, but we were not given the opportunity to weigh in, to offer suggestions, or to troubleshoot this move. I've heard from several parents who are not happy about this move, but feel that it's a done deal, and their input doesn't matter. That's a problem. It discourages parental involvement. Second, the letter was sparse on details concerning the move. I spent weeks calling principals, specialists, and directors to learn what this move would mean for my child. And I do want to thank the people that have reached out to us, Mr. Palmer, Mr. Chambers, through this process, and I do hope to see improvements in communication. Now, the main reason for the move is to address overcrowding in our schools by reclaiming underutilized space at STEM. Now, I understand our schools need space. My eldest was in a kindergarten class of 25 students last year, but I struggle to see how relocating pre-K D provides a substantial solution to the space issue. Relocating Blue Water's pre-K D will make 2 rooms available for general education, but my best understanding is that Blue Water is expecting to have maybe 90 new students next year. 2 classrooms is not going to be sufficient. PLU is not anticipating growth next year, but will likely see growth the following year as housing developments are completed. By relocating PLU's pre-K D, we free up 1 portable for general education. I don't know if that's going to be sufficient. The relocation of the pre-K D classes seems to be a Band-Aid solution for a growth problem that maybe we should have already seen coming. But what's most troubling about this move to me is that we are apparently comfortable removing disabled students from their neighborhood schools, segregating them in an isolated location, in some cases very far from their homes, in order to address these growth issues. Now, many studies over the past 40 years have shown that inclusion results in improved educational outcomes for students with disabilities without impacting the educational outcomes of typical students. Plus, it teaches empathy and compassion to both groups. Ideally, we should be moving towards more inclusion opportunities at all levels, including pre-K. I appreciate recent conversations regarding pre-K potential inclusion at STEM, but I really think that inclusion is going to be best in an elementary school, if not neighborhood schools. Now, I can tell you not everyone in this district prioritizes inclusion. My first conversation with an Okaloosa County educator regarding inclusion was when a kindergarten teacher told me that my son Isaac could maybe mainstream for a year or 2, but then he'd have to go to Silver Sands where he could learn how to shop and make friends, because she said those are the most important things. And he was 2 years old at the time. which tells me that this teacher didn't assess him based on his abilities, but on his diagnosis, and that's discrimination. As a parent, I'm not sure how to address that. I would ask that you use your leadership to remind people that inclusion is best practice. It should be a priority, and I don't know that this moving pre-KD to solve a space issue demonstrates that it is a priority. We certainly have space issues to address, and we do need to start using underutilized facilities. But as we move forward, our solutions need to honor parental involvement, they need to be substantial, and they need to reinforce the importance of inclusion. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lamberson. Excuse me, ma'am.
Yes.
Board members, any questions or comments?
I would just like to thank Ms. Lamberson for her efforts and for reaching out to district staff and her patients and communicating her concerns and issues and possible ideas to district staff.
Thank you. And I appreciate the reception that we've gotten. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor.
Yep.
All right. I think we have time for Ms. Paula Bathon, if I said that correctly. Ms. Bathon? And Mr. McInnes, I neglected, I know these folks all received the guidelines, but would you just give a brief overview?
Yes, sir. You'll have 4 minutes to make your presentation.
Thank you. Thanks for letting me address. So, hi, my name is Paula Bathon. I'm here on behalf of my children who are at Blue Water. As Dr. Lamberson stated, the parents were notified of this unilateral decision to move all the pre-KD students without being given an opportunity to voice their concerns or even ask questions in the matter. Had the parents and teachers been consulted, the trust and parent relationship with the school would still be intact, and it could have been addressed without the distress. Inclusion, like Emily mentioned, is a high priority that's not being met with this move. We must also consider our children's overall well-being. To solve a space issue, the choice was made to displace the children with special needs from their neighborhood schools. These are the children who need stability the most, and yet I learned Friday that shuffling ESE classes is done here on a regular basis. Many of these children are not yet equipped to handle this kind of upheaval, and disrupting routines and settings will only serve to stifle their development. Separation from their peers aside, there's the issue of the suitability of the STEM facilities to house our exceptional children. While the pre-KD suite classrooms may be designed for younger students, as a parent, I can't help but notice some glaring security risks. The campus is not secure. It opens straight up to a parking lot, and many of our kids are predisposed to elopement. The playground equipment doesn't offer proper accessibility and is currently restricting fall hazards with bungee straps. If we look at Blue Water, on the other hand, it's already equipped with community-donated playground specifically designed for children of all abilities. By moving Blue Water Pre-K away, we are effectively squandering this act of generosity. We as parents are also concerned about the amount of time that our 3- and 4-year-olds will be spending on the bus. My daughter's commute, for example, is more than quadrupled in traveling to STEM versus Blue Water. It's my understanding that transportation is part of the entitlement to a free and appropriate public education. So that should ensure that a child with an exceptionality be provided the commute comparable in length to travel as the time that it takes a neurotypical child. There's also parents who are uncomfortable even putting their children who are often nonverbal on a bus in general. Car rider families are faced with substantial obstacles if this move goes through, including the financial burden and possible need for childcare before and after school. I think a letter from Ruth Ryder of the U.S. Department of Education can help kind of show where we're going with this. From IDEA, she cites, children with disabilities in public institutions must be educated with children who are not disabled. Further, special classes, separate schooling, or the removal of children with disabilities from regular education environment occurs only if there's a specific severity of that specific child. So IDEA supports the child and that severity. not the needs of more space in a district. We know that we need to address overcrowding in our schools, but we ask you to keep in mind the undue hardships that families must go through to be separated from age-appropriate peers and their siblings. I know my daughters take comfort and joy seeing each other daily. Our neighborhood schools already adhere to the guidelines put forth by the Rehabilitation Act, FAPE, and the IDEA. Please don't uproot our kids.
Thank you, Ms. Bathon. Any comments or questions, board members?
Just for the general public or anybody watching, the idea that Ms. Bathon mentioned stands for IDEA, and that's often the acronym that's used, or it might be pronounced IDEA, but just in case somebody wanted to look that up or better understand that, it's IDEA.
Thank you, Ms. Rush. All right, board members, let me do some quick business here. I'm going to recess the current meeting, call into session the special meeting scheduled for 6:15, recess that meeting, and call back into session the regular session. At this time, is Ms. Renee House present? Please come forward, Ms. House.
Hello. Members of the board, my name is Renee House. I'm here representing my daughters, Isabel and Caitlin, who are at Blue Water Elementary, and the other pre-KD parents that are their children are part of the program and cannot be here to speak with you today. On April 5th, parents of the children currently enrolled in the Central Zone Pre-KD program received a letter from the school district stating our children would be relocated to the STEM Academy in Valpy this upcoming school year. While we understand there is an overcrowding issue in our county, we are distressed we did not receive a notice of public forum to bring forward our issues and discuss any possibilities, discuss any of this from becoming a possibility with you guys. This appears to be inadequate planning on the district's part. I would like to reiterate an issue that this move will impose on our children, as they will not have an opportunity for integration into a gen ed classroom with age-appropriate peers. As mentioned previously by Ms. Bathon, many families in this program are one-income families. The school day for many of these children is their only opportunity for inclusion with age-appropriate peers. On September 14, 2015, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services with the U.S. Department of Education released a policy statement on inclusion with children with disabilities in early childhood programs, stating it is well documented that the beginning years of all children's lives are critical for building early foundations of learning and wellness needed for the success in school and later in life. During these years, children's brains develop rapidly, influenced by experiences they share with their families, teachers, peers, and in their community. Like all children, it is critical for children with disabilities to be exposed to a variety of rich experiences where they can learn in the context of play and everyday interactions and engage with their peers with and without disabilities. This move presented by the board only isolates our children and may violate IDEA and its least restrictive environment requirements. Each public agency must ensure that to the maximum extent appropriate, children with disabilities, including children in public or private institutions or other care facilities, are educated with children who are non-disabled, and special classes, separate schooling, and other facilities are educated with children who are Special classes, separate schooling, and other removal of children with disabilities from regular educational environment occurs only if the nature or severity of the disability is such that education in regular classes with the use of supplementary aids and services cannot be achieved satisfactorily. We fail to see how this does not apply to our children who are part of your school system and receive funding for their enrollment. To segregate them, to isolate them from neurotypical children can lead to a child feeling ashamed of themselves and limiting their development in fundamental years. It would be foolish to assume our children don't know that they are unique and unlike some of their peers. To provide the board with a more personal experience, when my 5-year-old daughter started the pre-KD program, she could not be understood. Her teachers, in partnership with my husband and I, we worked diligently to bring her as far as we have with her speech. Caitlin, my 3-year-old, who is now part of the program, spent a great deal of her early years at home with me. Even though she heard me and other adults speak, she mirrored her speech after an age-appropriate peer, her sister, and she also cannot be understood. This provides just one scenario in your district of the importance of inclusion. It cannot go unmentioned that each member of the school board, faculty, and our teachers are in a partnership with each of us to find an effective education strategy for our children and keep an open line of communication in which we can discuss changes in our community and possible resolutions to such issues as overcrowding, so as not to hinder a differently abled child's ability to interact with his or her peers in a normal classroom setting. We feel your letter dishonored our partnership and trust with what appears to be a Band-Aid for an overcrowding issue. I urge the school board to reconsider their decision and to seek guidance from our teachers who work with our children daily and to heed their advice. In closing, we would like to collaborate with all of you on the issues facing our school system and explore opportunities for improvement and resolution. I urge the board to move towards a program that allow inclusion for these children, to allow them to hear words, to see actions, and to teach others to be a kinder, gentler, more understanding people.
Thank you, Ms. House. Any comments or questions? Mr. Vesta?
They've raised a number of very pertinent points, it seems to me. Ms. Jackson, would you have whichever staff member is most knowledgeable about this affair to give us an update and status and tell us what's going on and what comparisons were made and how this decision came about?
Mr. Chambers?
Thank you, Ms. House.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chambers, I believe you met with these parents individually, and Ms. Thrush, you've met with these parents.
Yes, I have met with all the speakers that presented this evening, as well as some other parents who are not here this evening.
Well, first of all, I do want to say I appreciate the comments of each of the parents. I think it is important. It's what we want in our school district, to have parents who are advocating for their children. I will say it was probably during the December time frame where we were talking about the central zone, and we were talking about space in the central zone. And we did brainstorm. We did look at ways that we could address that. And you never want to do a situation where you're necessarily displacing students. I think our ESC students, we know, are valuable to us. I think they're valuable to each and every one of us. And sometimes, like I shared with the parents, just being very honest, that sometimes you have to make difficult decisions. And this is a decision that was made in terms of the STEM Academy. The STEM Academy has resources there that are for ESC students and for younger students. And that was a situation that we did look at. We did send a letter home on April 5th. We did speak with principals before that. We did speak with teachers before that. If I were to say, if we could go back, I would like to say that we would talk to parents maybe in a better fashion, but we did send a letter home to parents. Since that time, we've met parents at the STEM Academy. We've toured with the parents that we did meet there. We met with parents on Friday as well. I think the meeting on Friday went extremely well, where each of the parents that we met with gave us some great suggestions. A couple of those suggestions were, a media center. We were able to add a media center, so to speak, to STEM, and we will do that next year. The non-disabled peers, we also looked at that. It was a great suggestion. So we will be adding VPK to the facility as well. The playground was also mentioned. We did put a playground there at STEM, which is ADA certified, but we're also adding playground equipment to the facility. I think our pre-KD students are very valuable to us, and each and every one of us understand that. Like I share with the parents, I understand, even though I do not have a disabled child of my own, I do absolutely understand where they're coming from. I appreciated their passion and their honesty, and we're trying to do everything that we can to make this a very successful move for the families. We've communicated with the principals in terms of the start times, so the families can have the ability to drop students off and get their other children back to whether it be Blue Water or whether it be Edge or whether it be PLU. So a lot has happened behind the scenes. A lot of communication has happened behind the scenes, but I do understand maybe some of the frustration from the parents in terms of their child was at a neighborhood school and they may have to go to STEM. So that's what I would say there.
Well, Marcus, to cut to the chase of the thing, and the three ladies that's just made the presentation, plus all the paperwork we received, have we, because now it's been very clear they're actually saying in their documents that we're not really complying with the requirements and stuff. Now, are we or are we not now? Because they did a very good job of outlined it and everything else, and the problem I'm having is, are they right, are we right? Because they're very adamant now that we're not really complying with a lot of the regulations. Are we or are we not?
So we are, and we've spoken with the state of Florida.
Huh?
We've spoken with the state of Florida. I spoke with Melody Summer, and are we able to make this move, so to speak? The answer was yes. We spoke, so then from there, spoke to the state of Florida. When it comes to inclusion, the students should be there with their non-disabled peers.
Well, and I know you normally do a great job, and it's been bothering me simply because I usually never even question when you're involved in something like this, but it don't appear that we've been very clear when the documents I've been reading and the phone calls I've been getting, that it's like I think we all agree that they're not really thinking that the things we're saying is true, because they're saying something just the opposite.
So let me be very clear.
Huh?
So let me be very clear, because anything that comes out of my mouth is going to be 100% honest. So when it comes to the non-disabled peers, in the initial move, we would not have had non-disabled peers at the STEM Academy. So we called the state of Florida, and we asked them, does this happen? And the answer is yes, this does happen. This happens in many school districts across the state of Florida. Mrs. Jackson said, we want to go ahead and remedy this. So we looked at a few situations, and a few of the situations weren't really too, when I say liking, I don't mean that word disrespectfully, to the liking of some of the parents that we met with. Some of those situations were, we were going to have field trips to our feeder schools where our kids would interact with kindergarten students. The STEM students have planned a play for our pre-KD students. They planned reading time to our pre-KD students, understanding that some of the students may, or some of the parents may want to opt out from that. After we met with the families on Friday, we said, it's absolutely, we hear your concerns. We're going to add a VPK to this program, and therefore they would have the non-disabled peers, which makes sense.
And if I could just add to Marcus' comments, I think historically we need to kind of frame how we're currently this year and how we have been opening up pre-KD units across the district. And just stop or interrupt me if I say something that is incorrect. But we don't automatically, and have not in the past, automatically had a pre-KD classroom at every school. In fact, we have other elementary schools that don't have a pre-KD class. And typically how we create a new pre-KD class is there are eligible students for that service or for a class, and again, depending on space available, a classroom is created. So there could be students, and in the case of Blue Water and some of our other schools, a pre-KD student might be zoned for another school, and I think Ms. Lamberson gave an example in her discussion points tonight, that while her family is zoned for PLU, her son was placed at a pre-KD program at Blue Water. So he or she was having to attend a school or a class that wasn't at their zone school. But as she stated, as students matriculate out of the program, usually there's an opening, if there is a pre-KD program, at your zone school, and we try whenever possible to place a pre-KD student at their zone school. But we currently have other parts of the county where there are not pre-KD programs at every eligible student's zoned school.
Correct. At Southside Elementary, for example, and not to make light of what's happening here in the central area, but Southside, we have students coming from the Laurel Hill area. We have students coming from the Baker area. So we have students who are being transported into Southside, phenomenal school, but to reiterate what you're saying, that's a situation in the north end of the county.
That we have. The other issue historically, and I certainly know that I want to address any security and safety concerns of any student, and if a school isn't secure or safe for pre-KD students or middle school students, whatever age, we need to address those concerns. But I know the board remembers that the STEM Academy was Valparaiso Elementary School, and there were all kinds of students, including pre-KD students with differentiated abilities at that school, pre-K through K. But yes, through the last 5 or 6 years, it has been staffed as a middle school. But where the current pre-KD unit that is at STEM is being staffed is in a facility or area that had been renovated to the tune of approximately $1 million at the time for pre-KD and ESE variated ability students. And so I hope that we can continue, and certainly some of the facilities have been modified since it was an elementary school, including the playground. But I appreciate the comments and feedback from the parents that the district has communicated with, as well as the pre-KD unit that is currently there, and input and feedback from seeing what is working and what isn't, and what our needs still are. I know there's cons in this decision, as we've just stated and just heard of. Can you talk about some of the pros in that we have pre-KD teachers in units that are isolated in the sense from a professional development standpoint?
Well, I think some of the pros would be you'd have multiple pre-KD teachers and aides who are working together at one site. Resources-wise, you'd have those resources at one site in terms of the supplies, in terms of our itinerates, whether it be OT, PT, they're coming together in one site. So in terms of travel times and so forth, it'd be more efficient that way. But just like I said with the parents, I mean, those things are factual, but I still get the angst that many of them feel. But those are some of the positives. When it comes to the safety, we have a pre-KD unit that's there right now, so we very much believe that it is safe. However, meet with the families, we have brainstormed some other areas where we could probably be even better. Spoke with Mrs. Thrush about some of those ideas. Mr. Palmer has already spoken with Steve Bolton on some of those ideas. The rooms that are there right now have sensors on them, so if a door opens, an alarm goes off. The playground is fenced, so there are a number of things that are in place. Could we be even better? Yes. Could we be even better at all of our schools in Okaloosa County? Yes.
And in regards to some of the issues, again, that the speakers mentioned, the overcrowding of our schools, not just in the central zone, but in this case we're primarily talking obviously about the central zone, and it's an issue that isn't going to go away, and we don't know year to year what types of students and how many students we will have. You know, Ms. Lamberson, it's a guessing game, and she provided numbers that we know of to date. We could have more pre-KD eligible students, we could have more gen ed students, we could have less of those students. But as far as the zoning issue, we are we have closed open enrollment at all of our Central Zone schools. And again, I don't want to repeat anything I've already said at numerous board meetings, but there are no impact plans, fees, discussions when neighborhoods, homes, apartments, developments are created in our county. We have no input from a school district standpoint. If a development comes in and gets created and there's children living in that development, they're going to need to go to a school, and we have to find the space in the schools we have. Again, it's a problem that isn't going to go away, and it is something that we'll address. Another brief positive was because of the input of the parents and possibly creating a VPK. The Central Zone is the only zone in the county that doesn't have a VPK program. So I know there was an article in the paper over the weekend about VPK and talking about how there are benefits in it, opportunities for improvement, and also how low the funding is. I think it listed around.
They also said how terrible the program was. You neglected to mention.
Well, yeah. So that's what I was going to ask Mr. Chambers. We're just getting information regarding that, and my understanding is that testing assessment piece was new, and so I didn't know if you had an update on that.
So we'll say, so I think that article was written globally.
It was a Miami Herald or Herald Tribune, I think.
So I spoke to Debbie Hahn as it pertains to VPK. And our students, when they're in kindergarten, they have to take the Flickers. It's a readiness assessment. And in Okaloosa County, 90% of our students pass that test that are in our current VPK classrooms.
So that's far different than what the newspaper.
Correct. They're given a global picture to VPK.
Marcus, something that I've also been curious when all of this was taking place, and Ms. Thrush supposedly has met with some of the individuals, and you've met with, but did y'all look at the possibility of doing a financial cost of being able to keep the kids at their school rather than move them to the center? I didn't see any document or nothing that. Just wondered, did y'all actually look into the possibility of, when you look at the cost, would it have been possible to have made other arrangements to keep them at their schools? And I'm just curious, did we look at that and see if it would have ended up being some way to have kept them at their schools when we compare the cost of because basically, I don't think any of the board members have seen anything that indicates what its own cost is to make this move and then throw in the transportation and everything. Did y'all take a look at it from the financial standpoint?
So I'll say I'm probably going to answer this probably a little bit outside of my area, but my understanding is that in the Central Zone, there's a space issue.
Yes, what?
And there's a space issue.
Well, that's what I'm saying though, once when you've been looking at it, was getting with Nick and whatever, if we looked at deciding, well, could we have moved a portable, could we have done something else and then looked at the overall cost? I'm just wondering, Nick, did we look at that? I know, Marcus, we don't have the space, but I'm just wondering if we considered something like that.
Yes, sir, we looked at that, and we would have needed 2 more portables as it is now, we ordered 6 portables for the district, 3 of them in the Central Zone. We would have needed another additional 2 at Blue Water itself had we not made this move. And
the question I'm asking, Dick, is if we'd have looked at maybe 2 more portables, if we would have saved, maybe satisfied a lot of the parents and what maybe they felt like was best for their children, could we have done that and satisfied the space question and still not been a economic burden or where we spent much more money doing that? That's the point I'm getting to.
It would have been another $100,000 for additional 2 portables,
okay,
to get them moved and set up. That's an estimate. But we also, what we're doing with this move and moving them to the STEM center, you have basically created 5 classrooms, 2 at Blue Water, 2 at Edge and 1 at Plu. And so you have a little extra room there for growth. And you know, we don't anticipate that we'll need to move a portable to either Edge or Plu this year.
Do you have a cost of what it's costing us to do what you're planning on doing?
I don't have a cost off the top of my head, but we do have a cost.
Can you also discuss some of the space available issues for portables at Blue Water, and how many portables we already have at Blue Water?
We have, I think we have around 8 at Blue Water. I'm not sure on the exact number. We're moving 1 in now. We're going to have to bring in additional service in order to do that. Even with the move, we cannot put another portable at Edge without taking playground space away. We're in a similar situation. We can always put another portable in, but it might be on the playground. It's going to start affecting the school. So.
And I mean, that's my understanding, is that if you added 2 more portables at Blue Water or at the other locations, is that our PE fields are already affected at many of those sites. And at Blue Water, where we're pushing 1,000 students, right, and where we're mandated to have PE 3 to 5 days a week for so many hours a week, and we're mandated to have recess every day. We need to have adequate space to allow that to happen with the time schedule that we have. And we also have an issue at Blue Water with lunchroom space. My understanding, I want to say it's almost a 10 to 2 o'clock window for lunch service at Blue Water, and we're getting into an issue of table space. And I'm with Marcus. Is this an ideal solution? No, and I agree. I think in hindsight, which is always nice to have, communication could and should be better. And especially with any parent group, but because of the age of these students and the concerns, the valid concerns of these students, I know we will do better, and I hope that we continue to work with this group to continue to look at solutions. But I know that compared to what we've been currently doing, that isn't ideal either. What we're currently doing and what we've been doing isn't the best scenario. The best scenario is that we're able to offer a classroom for a child of any ability at their zone school, but we don't have that now. And it is painful to take that away from some. It will benefit some, and it will hurt some. I think there's no question that every decision has a consequence.
Marcus, did we consider moving a grade from Blue Water like we've done in other places, rather than because of the kind of kids we're talking about? Can we look at the possibility of doing that to where we would have made space for these type kids and then perhaps moved a grade to another elementary? Did we look at that?
Are you asking me if we considered moving kindergarten or first grade?
Well, in other words, I'm just saying, did we consider, with the fact that we're the type of kids we're dealing with, did we look at that possibility? Like, you know, when we moved, like I think Destin Elementary, did we move a class over
fifth grade
to middle school at Destin Middle? And I mean, I'm just wondering, did we look at, because of the kids we're talking about and dealing with, I'm just wanting to make sure that we looked at every consideration, because of the fact of, you know, recognizing that those kids, I feel like we need to be very careful when we do these, and I know you have been, but I'm just curious, did we look at that possibility?
We did not look at moving, say, a fifth grade from
I'm
Edge
just
over to
throwing that out
Valpy.
because we have no We have no space at Ruckle and
Well,
or
we not-
Lewis
it don't
to handle
necessarily
the
have to
fifth
be
grade.
Ruckle, you know, because you remember when you wanted to move the people back from Desta Middle School to Ruckle, and, you know, you and I differed on the thing, but I mean,
Well,
I know
because we're
that
spending
if we
$1,000
already
per
have
student to
kids going
transport them
across
there.
to Destin Middle anyway, I'm just throwing that out as a possibility for the board to consider.
Yes, sir.
I think long-term, and I've said this again publicly as well as individually to district staff, the closure of Valparaiso Elementary School, which was its name at the time, had long-lasting and detrimental effects on the county, and we're seeing the results of that decision. I think, again, there's no question that we cannot continue to kick the can down the road, and that the rezoning bugaboo or bad word or whatever you want to call it, it's inevitable. We have no choice in the central zone but to rezone and consider doing something with the STEM Academy and the Lewis School situation. The Fish report is that we have an underutilized facility. The state would not allow us to build any more space, if I'm correct, new construction, if we have an underutilized facility. We have an underutilized facility. It doesn't solve, you know, we can't obviously make that decision tonight to solve the current issue before us or that's being presented this evening. But it is something that the board needs to recognize that it does need to take place.
Might have a comment, Chairman.
Yes, sir.
It's a very difficult situation, but so far I've listened to the reasons that we're doing this, and what is best for these kids seems to be at the bottom of the priority list. If I were an attorney representing these folks, I'd take this testimony and shove it up my school district's nose tonight. It's a space issue. It's an underutilized facility issue. But it doesn't appear to meet the guidelines that these kids' decisions should be made on. Also, Mr. Gutierrez says he can't tell us tonight how much it's costing to do this. It may well be costing more than it would have cost to fix it at the schools. I don't know and don't have that information in front of me. I don't know if this decision has been made final or whether we get another bite at it, but I can tell you right now I'm not sure I'm supportive of it.
And that's the follow-up question, Mr. Destin. And Mr. McInnes, the presentation that's been made to us has been made to us. The proposal has been made by the school district as appropriate. In response to Mr. Destin's question, will this matter come back to the school board for further questions or clarification, or is it purely an administrative matter?
The decision has been made thus far as an administrative matter. If there were budget issues or if additional funds had to be allocated that are not available right now in the appropriate budgets, then I suppose that issue might have to come here. Right. But in regard to just the assignment of the programs, that does not have to come in.
Exactly.
But now, Jeff, if we don't fund it, it can't be done, so.
I think that's what he's saying.
Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying if there's not money in appropriate budgets now, then they would have to come here seeking that. But if there is appropriate funding where they're using it, then that's already been approved by the board.
And these budget amendments that we do periodically, I suppose we're in charge of that, aren't we?
You are, but I don't know whether a budget amendment is necessary for what they're doing.
The budget stays in flux entirely forever, and the board has the authority by statute that we can change anything in that budget anytime we wish to. Is that not correct?
You can, but what you asked me was, do they have to bring this to the board? And the answer is, if they have it budgeted, they do not.
But what I'm now asking you, if 3 members of this board decided that they did not want to do this, and we turned around and made a motion to defund it, then they couldn't do it. Is that not correct?
Or
If we said that we did not wish to fund it because the budget stays in flux entirely, and the board is the only one, once the budget's set, the board is the only one then that can change the budget. But 3 members of this board at any time can change the budget and move money from one place to another, or not spend money that they've already budgeted. Is that not correct?
You can do that, but I don't
Yes.
know how, I mean, you would have to begin identifying all kinds of different budgets if it's a piece here and a piece there.
All right, it's $10.
Not mine.
Well, and what I would follow up with that, Mr. Walker, it might be that the board may choose to allocate the $100,000 or $200,000 for the portable buildings to place at Blue Water.
Or it also may be, Mr. Chairman, that the board may also decide that they did not want to fund it and then turn around and then give the superintendent and the finance officer instructions that we wish to buy 2 portables and put over there or wherever we did. If we, that is
I understand.
always open.
That's right.
At any time. And I mean, naturally, I have no idea what this board may decide to do, but we need to always remember that the board has the authority to move money anytime they wish during the entire budget year.
And if I could just speak for a moment, Mr. Walker, about that. My understanding is that there may be some projections of increased enrollment at Blue Water Elementary. Is that correct, Mr. Horton?
Yes, sir, Dr. White, that's correct. Expected enrollment next fall could be 1,000 students. Currently, and we track this during the year, neither Blue nor Blue Water have any available classroom space in their current footprint. Edge had reported 1 space, but it's actually the music classroom, so it's being occupied every day by someone. So this fall, there were no classrooms available. With projections that Blue Water expected to increase, specifically at Blue Water, there's a need for classroom space, certainly.
And I would just, the music currently at Blue Water is being held up on their stage because they don't have a classroom for their music period, if you will, or time.
Yes, ma'am. In many cases in elementary schools, having a classroom for music instruction, which is a full-time position and seeing students all day, is held somewhere other than a classroom.
And so then the compulsion,
And
the fact that we're talking about this is because of a projection of additional students next year.
Yes,
Is
sir.
that correct? All right.
And you know, I want to be very clear that, because I respect you 2 gentlemen very greatly. And Miss Jackson, I know it's not that I think that y'all not trying to do, but as Mr. Desson pointed out, my whole real concern is I've got to be convinced there's not any way to make sure that we're providing the service for these type kids. And I've got to be convinced of that, and I know that y'all are doing everything, and Mr. Horton, you and Mr. Chambers, and it's not y'all's fault that, first of all, we don't have enough money, we don't have enough space, we all know that. That's for sure not y'all's fault, and I know y'all probably doing the very best you can, but the reason I've asked and get into these is I've got to be thoroughly convinced that there's not some way to do what's best for those kids, and that's how I feel.
I would echo that sentiment. You may well have the only solution that's viable.
You may be, but
I've
I'm
got
not
more
being
questions
critical.
after tonight's presentation by the parents.
I do want to add that we also have Melody's here, but we have additional pre-KD projections in the central zone. So we're not just talking about those 2 classrooms. We're also projecting additional pre-KD rooms, and there will be empty spaces that we can fill at the STEM center. So you're not just talking about 2 additional portables.
And the board approved through a human resource agenda item, a pre-KD unit being opened at STEM Academy. So this spring, we opened and staffed a pre-KD unit at
Correct.
STEM, and it didn't come as a separate agenda item to the board, but because of the space issues this current year, and because of the number of eligible students that we had to create a pre-KD classroom, and we created one at STEM. So we already have a pre-KD unit at STEM.
And that, if you eliminated them from STEM, we would have to find a place for that unit also in additional, and I don't know how many more Melody projects, but she's got her projections for additional pre-KD on top of the 6 that we currently have in the central zone. 5 at the schools, 1 at the STEM center. There's projection for even more. And just to Mr. Walker's point about the inclusion, it's the same model as the Southside School, which is doing great. And it's how the Southside began before we added the elementary. But for years, Southside was pre-KD and VPK, and then they added the elementary after that. But so it's how Southside began.
Well, I still, as I mentioned, when I look at the cost and I look at the possibility of busing kids over to a Destin Middle School or something, again, I know this, it's a very difficult situation, but with all of the things that we've been going through in the past, I want to leave no doubt in anybody's mind that my main concern first is the kids. And then if it can't be worked out, fine, we do the best we can. But until I'm convinced, that's the reason I'm asking these kind of questions tonight. And that's the only reason.
All right. Well, I would say that we've had some great comments by the parents and some good questions and comments by the board members. Of course, this is a non-action item at this juncture. With that, unless there's any further discussion, we need to go ahead.
Well, to answer your question, though, where does this leave us now, Lamar? You asked the attorney, so what I'm asking, where are we right now? Where do we go from here?
In my opinion, for it to be any different, we'll take a motion by the board and a second with appropriate funding for a contrary solution.
Well, before we go that, can we, Mr. McGinnis, request from the superintendent, as communications continue with this parent group, and, you know, both Mr. Destin and Mr. Walker had some questions that didn't have answers that were provided tonight. Is it possible to come back to the board with information or more detailed information in regards to the cost of the proposed plan that was relayed in the letter to parents, and then cost and associate issues with options, because as they stated, the board hasn't seen that part of the decision-making process that district staff has gone through. And so would that be appropriate to ask
I think an information request,
the superintendent for that information request, so that we can provide that information?
Looking for financials?
Certainly you could ask for that information, yes.
Okay. And Marcus, adding to what Ms. Russ said, maybe, you and Nick and y'all looking at the fifth, what the question we kind of ask, and nothing may change, but at least, if Ms. Russ suggested, I think that would be a good way to handle it.
It would be. How long would it take you to get that information together? The next board member meeting or later? I know you have a lot of stuff you're doing.
The financial aspect?
And the alternatives possible and what their financial impact would be?
The financial aspect of the current situation, I believe that we could get that relatively soon. In terms of looking at the feasibility of 5th grade, that would take I think, longer, because with the likelihood is we would have to look at one elementary school in terms of 5th grade. But even with that, if you freed up 5th grade space there, still likely would be in a similar situation of having to move pre-KD students around. I know we would not want to move 5th grade students from all 3 of the elementary schools, but the financial of the current situation, I think we could have that by the next board meeting, but in terms of other grade levels, I think that that would take much longer.
And as part of the information requests, and I know it's kind of a moving target because we have some students matriculating out of the program for this upcoming fall, but I believe Melody does have some projections. We know hopefully the students that we currently have that are planning on returning, and can we kind of show, you know, as I stated, I don't know the percentages offhand of the students that are currently this year in a pre-KD program. Are they in a pre-KD program at their zone school? Is it 25% of the students at this pre-KD program are zoned here and 75% live outside the zone? If we can kind of have that information to compare so that we can see, because as I stated, what we're currently doing, even, you know, prior to considering opening up a STEM pre-KD program as we did this spring, we currently weren't placing pre-KD students at their zone school necessarily.
That's correct.
Okay.
Steve, can you provide that?
All right, then. Thank you, Mr. Chambers and Ms. Thrush. Anything else on that information request, board members? Okay. All right. Well, let's go ahead and recess the regular meeting, and we'll move now back into the public hearing. Board members, if you'll scroll down to 16.1. It is a public hearing for the adoption of a revised job description for Assistant Superintendent of Human Resources, presented by Mrs. Lindsay Maxey, Specialist Human Resources, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. Is there anyone here tonight to speak on this particular job description? Seeing none?
Move it.
Motion by Mr. Walker to approve.
Second.
Second by Mr. Destin. Any discussion? All right, let's vote. All in favor? The vote is 5-0. We'll close the public hearing and we'll go back into session on our regular meeting. And we'll scroll back up to, way up, to public comment. There are no blue cards tonight, is that correct, Ms. Evans? All right. There are no administrative personnel appointments, committee and staff reports we did in the workshop. And moving on to item 8.1, approval of the consent agenda.
Chairman, if I might.
Yes, sir.
Ask, 8.17, 8.18 are about selling the property in Baker, if you would place those for individual vote. And 8.26, I think, is the safety officer description, job description. Just a brief discussion on that one.
All right. Let me make sure I've got them written down correctly.
Yep.
8.17, 8.18, and 8.26 are
Yes, sir.
pulled from consent, and they're all three moved to discussion. And when we get to that portion of the agenda, we'll commence with that. All right? So, in that case, I'm now looking for a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Move it.
Motion by Mr. Walker,
Second.
second by Mr. Destin. Any discussion? Hearing none, let's vote. All in favor? Votes 5-0. All right, so before we move into discussion agenda, our agenda provides that we now move into Section 9, Superintendent Human Resources Recommendations. So, item 9.1, employees on administrative leave, presented by Mr. Chambers, Assistant Superintendent Curriculum and Instruction, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. This is an information item. 9.2, Deferred Retirement Option Program drop, presented by Mr. Chambers, Assistant Superintendent in Curriculum and Instruction, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. That too is an information item. All right. 9.3, this is an action item. Personnel recommendations presented by Mr. Marcus Chambers, Assistant Superintendent Curriculum and Instruction, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. Looking for a motion.
Move it.
Motion by Mr. Walker.
Second.
Second by Mrs. Thrush. Any discussion? All All right, seeing none, all in favor? The vote's 5-0. 9.4, employment separations presented by Mr. Marcus Chambers, Assistant Superintendent, Curriculum and Instruction, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. Looking for a motion.
Move it.
Motion by Mr. Walker,
Second.
second by Mr. Destin. Any discussion? Hearing or seeing none, let's vote. All in favor? Votes 5-0. 9.5, employee suspension presented by Mr. Marcus Chambers, Assistant Superintendent, Curriculum and Instruction, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval.
Move it.
Motion by Mr. Walker.
Second.
Second by Mr. Bryant. Any discussion? Hearing or seeing none, let's vote. All in favor? Votes 5-0. 9.6, employee transfers presented by Marcus Chambers, Assistant Superintendent, Curriculum and Instruction, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval.
Move it.
Motion by Mr. Walker.
Second.
Second by Mr. Destin. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor? Votes 5-0. 9.7, reimbursement, reinstatement of sick leave due to line of duty illness, injury, medical examination presented by Mr. Marcus Chambers, Assistant Superintendent, Curriculum and Instruction, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. Motion by Mr. Walker.
Second.
Second by Mr. Destin. Any discussion? Seeing none, let's vote. All in favor? The vote's 5-0. 9.8, leave without pay presented by Mr. Marcus Chambers, Assistant Superintendent, Curriculum and Instruction, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval.
Move it.
Motion by Mr. Walker.
Second.
Second by Mr. Destin. All right, let's vote. All in favor? The vote's 5-0. All right, now we go to discussion agenda. These would be the items that we pulled from consent, particularly 8.17. So board members, you may want to roll back up to 8.17. This is the spot survey.
It is.
Submission to the Florida DOE, Parcel 65 in Baker, presented by Dr. Bill Smith, Facilities Planning and Maintenance. So, Mr. Destin, you asked, so sir, if I'll turn it over to you.
Dr. Smith, if you would come up, please.
Yes, sir, Mr. Destin.
Chairman, 8.7 and 8.18 are related. 8.7 is the step we go through to declare it basically surplus, that it has no need in the system, if that's a good synopsis of what's happening. Philosophically, I'm just not in favor of selling property that the district has, because I don't know that one day we may use it for an extension facility. The other point is that I think around $40,000 is what we expect to get out of it. If we take that money and put it in the bank, it would generate about the same that we would get if we leased it to the Baker Water Works, who I think is interested in it, for $100 a month. And so, just from a fellow who's in business and tries to make money and not sell assets, just I don't understand what's driving us to want to sell that property.
Well, that's an interesting concept now, leasing.
And unless Mr. McGinnis tells us we can't do that, I mean, we end up generating the same amount of money.
And we
but
keep the
still-
property.
And still own the property. So philosophically, I'm not going to vote to sell the district's property when I don't know that one day we may need it.
Well, I like keeping things and getting paid for it. I don't know if that's...
And I don't know if the Baker Water Works thinks it's worth $100 a month, but if they want to use it, that's a pretty cheap price.
It's up to the board. The board can lease the property.
Certainly.
It's just the privy of the board, what you would like to do. They would like to use the property. I have not approached them about a lease. I'm sure they would not be opposed of it. What they want is the long-term use of the property.
I understand.
Well, on that note, I will make a motion that we table this to give Mr. Smith an opportunity to speak to them and see if they're interested at all.
Motion by Mr. Destin to table,
Second it.
second by Mr. Walker.
If I could ask Dr. Smith, if the tabling of this item is approved, can you also come back and, I don't believe Baker School is using the property in any way at this time. You had mentioned at the workshop a previous use for it. But if you can have Mr. Martello, kind of maybe research what it has been used for and when's the last time it was used.
I'll give you some dates. It was a cornfield, but it was about 25 or 30 years ago.
Okay.
But I'll get you some dates and some uses, and also bring you back an answer or bring you back a lease. So you'll have options.
All right, Dr. Smith. So we need to vote then on the motion to table. We have a motion by Mr. Destin, Who made the second?
Me.
Mr. Walker?
Mr. McGinnis, since these two items are related, do we have to make a motion to table both those items, or can the motion be to combine them and table both
I
of them?
think you could cover both under that same motion, if that's what you'd like to
Yeah,
do.
that was the intent of the motion.
All right, so tabling item 8.18 and 8.19 for it to come back.
No, it's
Excuse me,
8.17 and
8.17,
8.18.
8.18, thank you.
Right.
For it to come back to us
Yeah.
at a later time. All right, so is there any discussion about the motion to table? All right, seeing none, let's vote. All in favor? The vote is 5-0. All right, so let's move down now to 8.26.
Yep. And that's the one on the description, I think, right?
Yes, sir.
Lindsay.
Yes, sir. Request to advertise a public hearing for the adoption of a new job description for specialist safe schools, presented by Ms. Maxey. Thank you, Ms. Maxey. Mr. Destin.
And I wanted to thank staff for the change they made. That goes a long way toward addressing the issue. I just, every once in a while I have to ask the attorney if I understand English or not. The wording changed from requiring the bachelor's degree to its preferred. That would give us the option to let someone who did not have the bachelor's degree apply, who had maybe more experience in the field of security.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, my object is just try to get Ms. Jackson as many options as she can have.
When you combine the addition of that word preferred with the additional language that already is there in line 5, which allows other alternatives to be accepted, certainly someone else could apply.
Any other board members have any questions about it?
Thank Ms. Maxey.
The main thing, Lindsay, is let's make sure we're all very clear of what it does say in me, and I think you and Marcus have talked about that at length.
Okay.
And the minutes will reflect what you pointed out, Mr.
Right.
Preston.
In that case, I'll move that we approve 8.26.
All right, motion by Mr. Destin.
Second.
Second by Mr. Walker. Any further discussion? Hearing none, let's vote. All in favor? The vote is 5-0. All right, I think that covers the pulled items. We've done section 9, and we're moving down to section 11 because we've done the discussion agenda now. That would be program owners' representatives business. Mr. Walker, 11.1.
Yes.
Anything,
I
sir?
would make the motion.
Okay. That would be just information. Yeah, 11.1.
Right.
11.2 would be authorization for a professional services agreement from Faithful and Gould for price validation for program number 5, task order number 21, Richburg School Classroom Innovations and Roofing Project, presented by Steve Bolton, Director of Facilities Planning and Maintenance, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval.
I'll move it.
Motion by Mr. Walker. Second?
And I'll second that.
Second by Mr. Bryant. Any discussion?
Well, I believe Christy emailed, Mr. Dustin had mentioned that he had reviewed hard copies of the plans, so we were able to get digital copies of those plans. And I think Ms. Scallon was clear of what, we could pay for and not pay for with this agenda item. And there's still unmet needs at Richburg School, even with this project. We still have some front office area work, and as Mr. Chambers mentioned in our previous discussion, we have security issues at all of our schools, and that school was at one time closed. And it's also aging, and then as we've stated, enrollment has at least doubled at that location. And I don't know what the projections are for next fall. But this is a significant project. I hope it alleviates some of their concerns, but again, I think we'll have to really look hard at how we're going to prioritize the numerous capital needs that we're going to have up at Richburg.
Thank you, Ms. Rush. So we have a motion and a second. If there's no further discussion, let's vote. All in favor? Votes 5-0. All right, 11.3, program number 5, task order number 21, GMP for Richburg School Building 9 renovation roofing project, presented by Mr. Steve Bolton, Director of Facilities Planning and Maintenance, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval.
Move it.
Motion by Mr. Walker.
Second.
Second by Mr. Bryant. Any discussion? Hearing none, let's vote. All in favor? Votes 5-0. All right, 11.4, shared savings, Jacobs L3 Capital Outlay Program 5 task orders 1, 2, 5, 6, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12.
Move it.
Motion by Mr. Walker.
Second.
Second by Mr. Bryant. Any discussion? Hearing none, let's vote. All in favor? Votes 5-0. Information Technology Seat Management, no business. Item 13, Mr. Attorney, your business, sir.
Yes, sir. One item, Mr. Chairman, I would ask the board tonight to authorize a representation agreement with Attorney Joe Hammonds to handle employment-related matters, and once that's established, then authorize him to handle an appeal from an employee, JL, that has been requested recently.
All right, sir. So you need a motion?
Yes, sir.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Destin. Second by Mr. Walker. Any discussion? Hearing none, let's vote. All in favor? The vote's 5-0.
And for the record, the rate on that agreement will be the same that's been approved recently by the board in his other letters of agreement.
All right, thank you. All right, Madam Superintendent, your business.
I do have some business this evening. Mr. Andy Johnson, are you here? I'm going to take about 5 minutes of your time. I want Andy to share with you something that has been very near and dear to my heart. It's our student training program, our STP program. You made a significant investment into that program, and I just wanted to take the opportunity to share a little bit of good news with you to see that your money is being spent very wisely.
Whoever thought discipline would bring good news, right?
We're not going through this whole thing, by the way. This is
say,
just...
have 5 minutes.
No. I have a, is that the only screen here that we've got right there for the PowerPoint?
No, they can
We
see
have one in
it.
front of you.
We can see. All right. Oh, yeah. Well, all right. Student training is better than student punishment. One of the things that Mrs. Jackson first did when she took office was to begin looking at student discipline, out-of-school suspension rates. And we established a student training program that first, till school year 2013-14, the number of out-of-school suspensions in Okaloosa County were increasing. At the end of school year 2012-13, there were 3,015 incidences of out-of-school suspension, coupled with 5,699 days of out-of-school suspension. 5,699 days, students received zeros and no instruction. Okay? Let that sink in for just a minute. 5,699 days of no instruction. Students who had little concern for their grades had learned how to avoid school and schoolwork by misbehaving. The truth is, folks, that the students who like us the least actually need us the most. And one of the things that I experienced while I was retired after 2007, I pulled up to some gas pumps. I live in the north end of Okaloosa County, and I heard a rumble behind me on one day that I was retired. I looked behind me and I saw a 16-year-old that I knew that was a student in a local school. He was dressed in camouflage. He was driving a four-wheeler and had a canoe behind him. In the canoe was rod and reel and shotguns. And I called the young fellow by name and I said, "Isn't today a school day?" He said, "Oh yes sir, it's a school day, but I've been suspended for 2 days and I thought I'd do a little hunting and fishing on my days off." On my days off, going to do a little hunting and fishing. Had figured out how to avoid schoolwork. Really didn't care about schoolwork, okay? Cared more about hunting and fishing. Ms. Jackson said our kids are going to care about schoolwork and we're going to create something that causes them to care about their schoolwork. So a new student training program, we call it STP, was created. Its philosophy was simple. Students need to be in school to learn both academic and behavior skills. What I'd like for you to do for just a minute, this manual you can see is of some substance. This is our training manual. This is what we go over every year with our monitors and one administrator from every school. There's real meat and potatoes here. Like Ms. Jackson said, we're not going to go over it, but the pages that are marked, that first tab shows you our purpose and our goals. The second tab shows you that we spend time with these monitors and these administrators going over research, valuable research. Our year started with trauma-informed care. We spent time talking with these trainers about trauma and what trauma-informed care was all about. The next tab talks about a comparison of out-of-school suspension to student training programs. And one of the things that I would highlight there is it's checked for you in that fourth box down, the comparison between an out-of-school suspension. The school removes itself from the responsibility of teaching academics, but is still responsible for the student's academic performance. When you look at STP, the school maintains responsibility for delivering instruction to the students and is still responsible for the students' academic performance. You see that we have in our next page that's tabbed suggested what a first-class STP room would be. The next tab is truancy script guide. These STP monitors are required. New initiative, Ms. Jackson spoke with Judge Ketchel. We implemented a third part of the statute with regard to truancy, and there's the script. One is very positive and upbeat, and the other one is very frank and to the point, depending upon what the circumstance of that student and why that child is staying home. The last tab, it's the beginning of the entire last section that shows you the many different kinds of misbehaviors that can be addressed in that STP time spent with a monitor, that monitor takes and talks with that youngster about how they could handle the situation differently. This is the ideal learning environment for our STP program. Mr. Brian Humphrey, who's seated back there, built these for about 30 of our schools. It puts the youngster in a situation where they can be entirely focused on their behavior module that they're working on and entirely focused on their schoolwork. Well, to get to the meat of it, amazing things began to happen when we implemented a system where people were trained in what to do and how to do it. I want you to look at the data, look at the numbers that's in front of you. The first column there was 2012-13 out-of-school suspension student counts. And as we track each racial group or ethnic group across from year to year, you'll see diminishing numbers. That's what we wanted to hear. The next page, or our next slide, as you look at that slide, I want to give you copies of this presentation. We're just quickly going through it. Is again that you'll see that there were less and less students receiving STP. One of the questions was, is STP really a deterrent? Well, yes, it's really a deterrent because, as you can see, there are diminishing numbers of students who enjoy their experience in STP. Okay? We stopped. Mr. McGinnis can share with you that we were really excited about these diminishing numbers, as was the Office of Civil Rights and Southern Poverty Law Center. But 2 years ago, they began talking about not numbers, but looking at rate, looking at the rate of OSS, looking at the rate of STP. And so what we began doing with our principals in a program that Mr. Horton and his group put together was a program where we could look at rates of STP and rates of out-of-school suspension. And if you look at the blue bar, this is first semester last year, as opposed to the green bar, first semester this year. This is looking at our elementary ethnic groups, and you can see, again, less students going to STP. Out-of-school suspensions in elementary school, you can see the same trend. That's what we like. Middle school, STP, again, you can see by and large the green bars are shorter than the blue bars, meaning less and less students are going to STP. Means they're better citizens and better students in our schools. The one anomaly that we have with our middle school, out-of-school suspensions with our African American students, The thing that's really interesting about this is unlike any national data, last year in our middle schools, African American students, the rate was less than our white students, which is an anomaly nationwide. High school, you can again see STP data for high school trending down. We like it. Again, trending down without a school suspension. So in a nutshell, that's where we are with STP. It's a good program. It's effective. It causes our youngsters to be better citizens in their school and better students in their classrooms.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. And of course, we're talking about children that have visited typically the administrative offices for behavior issues. And one time I did a micro study, and I found that by far, the good news is the vast majority of our students never go to the discipline office once. Okay? And this is a very small percentage of students that we're talking about. So thank you for the data.
And I think it's important to note that our sheriff is very happy that our high school students are not suspended out of school, and they might choose to take the opportunity to do something that will get them in real trouble. So I like having our kids in school, and I appreciate your support of this program.
Yeah, I'd like to take this opportunity to congratulate Ms. Jackson and her staff. When you and I first started here, things were not looking good, and this program you've worked on diligently.
Yes,
made a big difference. We've also tried to work on our expulsions.
Absolutely.
And we're making some progress there. We now give students who will sign a behavioral contract the opportunity to come back early.
Yes.
I would like to see us continue to work on that issue. We're still expelling students for a couple of years, and the infraction does not even warrant prosecution in the criminal justice system. What we need to do, and what Judge Keschel has talked to us about, is to have a diversionary program like they have in the criminal system. And I hope before we leave we'll be able to work on that too.
That's our goal. That's our goal.
$20.
Oh, he's going behind it.
We know who's important, don't we?
Y'all call him again. We'll see. All right, so Superintendent, anything else?
No, sir.
All right, so moving on to board members' announcements and requests, but let's go ahead and do 15.1 first. We talked around it during the workshop. I am willing to continue as the alternate, and Mr. Bryant, I think you graciously allowed that you would continue to be the representative. So we're looking for a motion to that effect. Motion by Mr. Walker, second by Mr. Destin. Any discussion? All right, let's vote. All in favor? The vote is 5-0. All right, board members' business. Mr. Walker, I'll go to you, sir. Okay, yes, sir. Mr. Destin?
Nothing tonight, Chairman.
All right, Ms. Thrush?
I had a few things I failed to mention on Thursday. I wanted to congratulate Brianna Tingle Fitzsimmons, an aspiring doctor or lawyer. She's not sure because she's just in 4th grade at Floros Elementary School, and she earned already a 2-year Florida prepaid scholarship through the Florida Tax Watch program, who also honored our principal, Don Massey of Floros Elementary School. So congratulations to both of them. I wanted to mention, unless Mr. Bryant is, that Bethany Davis, Crestview High School student, received first place in the Congressional Art Competition. And again, I know we discussed at the workshop the amazing artwork that our students created. This weekend, we had outstanding representation from our middle school students at the track and field state competition. The mile split data was too long for me to go through, but I know that we had first place and third place in girls discus. Both the first and third place winners are from Okaloosa County, Marissa Clay at Pryor and Megan Haig at Ruckle Middle School. So congratulations to those two young ladies, and I'll try to post on Facebook some of our other state middle school competitors. I also want to congratulate the Niceville Lady Eagles softball team. Let's cheer them on towards the end of this week as they represent our area in the Final Four for softball. Also, Elliott Point Elementary, I think we mentioned last week, was competing in a national archery competition. They did so well at the national competition that they are moving on to an international or world level competition. So congratulations to our young archery students at Elliott Point Elementary School. And just wanted to remind the public that because of Memorial Day, our next board meeting will be on a Tuesday, the 29th. And we won't have a board meeting before school ends and graduations commence. So our first graduation, I believe, is this Thursday at Silver Sand School. So congratulations to all of our graduates, all ages, and even those matriculating from one level of school to the next level of school. And thank you to all of our staff, students, instructors, non-instructional staff, and administrators, and district level staff for another great school year, 2017-18.
Thank you, Ms. Ford. Mr. Bryant.
Just one quick announcement. I mentioned the other day that I had rode with one of our bus drivers up on the north end. After our workshop the other day, I decided to walk down to Central, and I see that Ms. Jinks and Mr. McInnes are here tonight. And just want to thank all of our mechanics, all of the people that work behind the scenes with the buses. Had a great conversation with several of our mechanics the other day at the Central Transportation. Their work is tires. Make sure I say it right. Mm-hmm. They work hard about that. And I just want to say thank you to all of those folks behind the scenes who help keep those buses running, and the drivers who get our kids to and home, or to school and home safely. We appreciate all that you do. And that's it, Dr. White.
Thank you, Mr. Bryant. And I'll just share that Connie and I spent a wonderful Friday evening with the Choctawhatchee Style Marchers at their annual band banquet. And board members and other folks, I know that I'll be seeing you around at some of these activities as we head into this good time of the school year. Mr. Attorney, if you don't have anything else, board members, superintendent, this meeting is adjourned.
Another one under our belt, huh?
Heading up.